Hello, people. Andrew here, talking about comics from a reader, collector, speculator, investor point of view, in that order of importance to myself. Today I'm looking at the Solo Avengers, actually the first 20 issues of the Solo Avengers, because then it went through a title change. And this happened between the years 1987 to 1989. In the early 80s, there was only one Avengers title, and that was The Avengers, the one that was started in 1963. About midway through the 80s, we get the West Coast Avengers, and it sold well enough that there was a third Avengers book, joining the lineup, and this was Solo Avengers. It was harking back to the days of the Tales to Astonish and of Suspense type of storyline, where there were two features in the book. This would be a slightly different in that those books featured two characters consistently throughout the book once they got there. Solo Avengers was going to feature one character consistently, and that would be Hawkeye, who is perhaps the most popular Avenger without a book at the time. And the second feature would feature anybody who had been an Avenger or who was currently Avenger, generally without their own book, and it would tell a story about those characters. The main part of the Hawkeye, I'll talk about the Hawkeye part first, was written by Tom DeFalco and illustrated by Mark Bright. But later on, Ralph Macchio, Howard Mackie, they became writers, and then you had Al Milgrom and Ron Lim provide some of the artwork. And as far as the artwork is concerned for the Hawkeye series, it's fine. It's nothing to write home about. It's just... It serves the story, and that's about all I can say about the artwork. As far as the story, well, it starts off on a good foot. The idea is to retell Hawkeye's origin, and they do that over 5 issues, because, back in the 60s, it was fine to say that the swordsman trained Clinton Barton how to be the best archer in the world. And, you just accepted that that's the case. But, it's 80s. It's 20 years later. We're sort of questioning that a little bit and saying, why would a swordsman train somebody to be the best archer in the world? It didn't make a lot of sense. So the origin story that's that is presented within these first 5 issues, mainly the second issue is the big origin story, sort of answers some of these questions. And introduces a character by the name of Trickshot. In the first issue, he's just sort of the shadowy figure, but that's, his sort of first appearance. He's shadowy there. He's controlling things. He's manipulating things. And by the second issue, you get to see him in full costume and how he's affected Hawkeye's life. The story makes, enough comic book sense that there's reasons why the swordsman, this guy Trickshot, and Hawkeye are all mixed together. It goes into some of his carny background and how he became the best archer. The story goes on for about 5 issues with an unexpected ending. Not shocking or big revelation, but just unexpected. And it was a decent 5-issue storyline, about Hawkeye's origin. And I should be pointing out that even though I say 5 issues, it's really not, because it only takes up half the book. So it's like 2.5 issues to tell this story, which was fine. It was a decent 5-issue beginning. Following that, we get to Hawkeye trying to get back to the States, and he runs into a couple of problems, and he teams up with Silver Sable and Sandman before he makes his way back to the States. And again, that's fine too. It's sort of a continuation of the story. The story continues moving forward with all of these developments. But once he gets back into the States, we end up with nothing more than a series of one-shots. A villain is introduced doing something bad. Hawkeye gets involved. They fight, and then Hawkeye wins. Either the villain runs away or he wins outright. Next issue, the villain is introduced. Hawkeye gets involved. They tussle and tangle. Same sort of result. And this went on all the way till the last couple of issues where Howard Mackie started to broaden the stories a little bit and introduce the Plant Man and the Orb. But for the most part, it's just Hawkeye, villain, and it becomes kind of boring. I mean, there's no real character development. There's no story to speak of. It's just watching Hawkeye in action, and that's all there is to it. There's a couple of things that seem to repeat itself. Not every issue, but there's there's the idea that Hawkeye is the least Avenger, the one that's easiest to take down, the least powerful, and that's reiterated a number of times. And I have a feeling that part of the book was to show you that he's not. Look, he can fight with his arrows. He can fight without his arrows. He can throw objects, on a level comparable to even Bullseye. He learned that part from the swordsman, how to throw things. And he's not, and he's also been trained by Captain America in hand-to-hand combat, so it gets a chance to show Hawkeye doing all of this stuff rather than just shooting arrows. And then, of course, the other part is all of the trick arrows. He's got the little heads, the little canisters that he sort of puts at the end of the arrow. It's all about the same size, slightly different weight, so that for balancing purposes. And a lot of them make a lot of sense. You got the flash arrow, the flare arrow, sonic, fog. Some of them seem a little bit much, but it is a comic book. Like the net arrow is good, but you're getting a net in this small canister. The grappling hook is another one, and the rocket arrow, the explosive arrow. He has all of the arrowheads just as much as Batman's always got his utility belt and has the right thing for the right time. Well, that's Hawkeye with his arrowheads. He has all of these different arrowheads to get him out of all of these different situations, and that's fun enough. But it's every issue. This is what we see. So, going on now to the backup feature, and then I'll talk about whether it's worth a read and all that sort of stuff. So we'll start off with the first issue here. I mean, the backup issues, the unfortunate thing that I found with the backup issues was that it's only half a book, so it's only about 10 to 12 pages that you're going to get out of the backup story of one of these Avengers. And they're just weak stories. I mean, these little short stories seem to work well with, the supernatural and the horror type of thing, but they don't work so well with the superheroes. Again, we're getting a little bit more than just here's the hero, here's the villain, here's the outcome type of thing, and there's really no big character development. There's a couple of times that they talk a little bit about, the theme of this story is that love can conquer all for some, and little bits and pieces about their history perhaps, but there's really no big storylines for any of them. And most of the stories are weak. They're written by a bunch of different writers. There's some artwork. The first one here has a Jim Lee artwork. There's Amanda Connor provides a story later on, and Dave Cockrum does a story. So there's some art, but it's not even necessarily their best material. It's just that they're featured here. So this first one here, the first issue, Solo Avengers, featuring Mockingbird as the second one. I liked the idea of what they did here, and it's unfortunate that they didn't do that again later on. And that is that Hawkeye has his main story where he's going through the motions in the first part of the story. The Mockingbird tale echoes that story. It happens at the same time that Hawkeye's story is, but from a different perspective and a different thing going on. I think that would have been an interesting story to see from a number of times. We'll see the Hawkeye main story and one of the other characters that was in that story. Let's see it from their angle, or what were they doing at that time to affect Hawkeye's story. And I think that would have been an interesting perspective on things. But it was only in this first issue that happens. After that, the second story has nothing to do primarily with the first story. Sometimes it throws back to other events that have happened in West Coast Avengers or in other titles, but for the most part, it's a standalone story that has very little to do or nothing to do with the Hawkeye story. So the first one is the Mockingbird, and I did like the Hawkeye story and the Mockingbird story. The Mockingbird story is written, illustrated by Jim Lee. It was off to a good start. And this is the second, appearance. There's the first full appearance of Trickshot in costume is in the second issue, and this is very much the origin issue of Hawkeye, and it's a good origin. I should say it's a decent origin. Cleans up a lot of that stuff about the swordsman and what have you. And the backup features Captain Marvel. It touches a little bit on Captain Marvel's origin, but I don't know really any more now than I did then I haven't read unfortunately, I haven't read the Amazing Spider-Man where she first got her powers. So this alludes to a couple of people and some of the events, but it doesn't make it any clearer for somebody who's never read the origin. Just a few details that don't really matter, and the story doesn't really matter. Some of these books are good for collectors. I will. Okay, so I'll say now that I don't think overall that there's really a lot of stuff that to be read here. It's not a book that I would recommend that you dive into and read. There are better books out there involving all of these characters. The Hawkeye stuff is decent in the beginning, but then it just becomes like a one and done, almost like a throwaway type of story. And so, but there are collector moments in there. As I say, if you were a collector of Captain Marvel or Mockingbird or Jim Lee, and in this situation, you've got Moon Knight. So if I was not going to be buying the Solo Avengers or keeping this, I would be keeping this for Moon Knight. Some people might keep it for the Shroud. The Night Force makes an appearance here. They just sort of show up and walk away. So your Moon Knight story is telling. All it is sort of explaining some of his abilities. And I find that was in some of the cases of these stories is just, oh, you don't know about Moon Knight? Well, here you can read Hawkeye's adventure, and then you can also read a little bit and familiarize yourself with Moon Knight. Hawkeye's up against battle. Hawkeye goes against a number of decent villains, but again, it's the same sort of thing. The Black Knight story here is just a little bit more education about the Ebony Blade. So if you were interested in that, that's where it is. And this is the fifth and final of that Trick Shot storyline, which was pretty decent. And I wasn't really crazy about the Scarlet Witch story. As I say, the backup stories, the second features, they really just did not offer an awful lot. They offer a lot for collectors who are interested in characters, but the stories themselves really just didn't have a lot of meat. You get to. I don't think that there was any particularly strong covers in this. This one is probably one of the better covers, and it does feature Hawkeye and Black Widow. One of they originally teamed up in Tales of Suspense, and they were a team for a while, but two separate story thing. But you get to see Hawkeye and Black Widow in that one. And this was, again, I liked his time when Hawkeye was working with Silver Sable and Sam, and she was about the only one that recognized his potential and said, he's actually a very good fighter. Maybe he should work for Silver Sable. I could use a man like that for some of the adventures that we go on. So she recognizes his skills, but it's all these other villains that say that he's, no good. And then we got a Falcon story. Nice Kevin Nolan artwork for the cover, which is nice. But if it features Dr. Pym, and again, I'm not really crazy about Dr. Pym. This was this the Amanda Connor one? I'm not sure. No, it wasn't. But I did feature Hellcat, and there's Shroud one. I like Hellcat, so again, if I was a collector, I'd be buying it for the Hellcat. But the story itself is, again, it's they're Hellcat versus the Mad Dog, who is her husband or ex-husband, but there's and this is for the two people that collect Dr. Druid or like Dr. Druid, so he is featured here. It's not a good story. I think there's a new villain in here called Stonecutter, but it again really goes nowhere. It doesn't. It just a fun little story with Hercules, Hawkeye up against. This was one of the better villain groups. This is something that I would have liked to have seen possibly have been expanded, because they're like an acrobatic group that robs jewelry or whatever it is that they're doing, and Hawkeye gets involved in that. And he's got four of these different guys at the same sort of physical strength level of them. So it'd be an interesting competition. They could have developed that into a longer story with a little bit more meat on it and a little bit more relevance, but that doesn't happen. This is the Amanda Connor does the Yellow Jacket storyline, and again you got Hawkeye versus off the pseudo Abomination. It is the Abomination, but his mind has been taken over by somebody else. He's still got the strength, but doesn't have all of the history of the Abomination. And it's nice to see Yellow Jacket, the new Yellow Jacket, in his story. So I enjoyed that as well. So this one would be for me a little bit more enjoyable than some of the other ones I read. And I like the cover, and I like the Abomination, and it's Amanda Connor artwork. against Wonder Man and against this motorcyclist. Somewhere out there, I'm missing issue number 14. It's in one of these boxes out here somewhere, but so I'm skipping that one. We're up to number 15, and again, you get to see Hawkeye and Black Widow teamed up together with a secondary story by the Wasp. See, this is where one of these stories might be interesting because this one also features Mockingbird. So this is where I would have maybe have done a story where it was either Hawkeye and Black Widow take the primary part on the first part of the story, and the second feature is about Mockingbird and how she's tied into this story and seeing it from her perspective. Might have been a little bit more interesting. We're introduced to a character by the name of Pamela Douglas. She is the cousin of Heather Douglas. Heather Douglas is Moondragon. And this story about Moondragon is written by Peter Gillis. Now, I don't care for the story that he wrote, and it's spread out over 3 issues, but there's a spot in between each one of these about Moondragon and her cousin Pamela. Moondragon and the character of Isaac Krishn's Gargoyle perished in the New Defenders. This series, this little trio of stories, brings them back into the Marvel universe. So, as much as I did not like the story, I don't like what he was trying to do and how he developed it. It did bring these characters back into the Marvel universe. And the Gargoyle one, that's fine, but I do like Moondragon, so I'm happy that she's back. But it's really not a very good story. This is the first appearance of Pamela Douglas, who does go on to become her own character, and we'll get to that. Of interest here is the artwork of Dave Cockrum doing the Submariner stuff. And, once again, if you're collecting certain characters and whatever, this features Dr. Octopus and Sandman and, Hawkeye versus Dr. Octopus. So, quite the challenge, This Texas Twisters story was really, really bad. And then we get the second part of the Moondragon saga, which again I didn't like any of the 3 parts of it. So yeah, is this the worst of the bunch? Well, it's not very good. And we begin the Plant Man story here. The Black Panther story harkens back to the Don McGregor type of stuff that was written in Jungle Action, more so that grounded Black Panther story. And it was fine too. And then we get the final issue number 20, where Moondragon comes back, and when she comes back, her cousin Pamela Douglas becomes Sundragon. So this is the first appearance of Sundragon. Have we seen Sundragon since this? I don't think so. Maybe she's out there somewhere, has made an appearance here or there, but really, the whole story was really well. I didn't like it. I thought it was bad. I thought it was good to have Moondragon back in the fold. I don't care about this character Sundragon. I think that was kind of unnecessary. But this is where Sundragon first makes her appearance, and this is the Plant Man story that doesn't resolve just completely here. It may continue on into 21, but I'll get to that in a second. I don't know, but this actually starts to begin to develop some of Hawkeye's personality and character development in these last 2 issues of Solo Avengers. Because it's a 2-part story so far. We've got the 19 and 20 are all part of this Plant Man and Orb storyline. So in some ways, it's like a missed opportunity to really explore the character of Hawkeye. After Solo Avengers number 20, the title stops being called Solo Avengers and becomes Avengers Spotlight. The reason being is that they looked at it as kind of a twofold situation. A lot of comic books would be on the racks and they would be alphabetical. So people who come in looking for Avengers books, they would see the Avengers, but then they may not be aware that there's the West Coast Avengers down here and Solo Avengers over here, because they're looking for Avengers book. The idea of changing the name from West Coast Avengers to Avengers West Coast and from Solo Avengers to Avengers Spotlight meant that they would all be grouped together in a store for purchasing. It'd be easier to find them and easier to purchase. So there was that reason, and the other reason being that Avengers was the stronger name, the name Avengers, and these all felt like West Coast Avengers felt like it was a spin-off, as did Solo Avengers. They are spin-offs, but by putting the main name first, it may attract people to think, well, this is more than a spin-off. This is like a sister magazine or a companion magazine to the Avengers, and hopefully drum up greater sales with that. So, as of issue number 21, it changes to Avengers Spotlight. So these 20 issues, is it worth the read? Well, you can kind of get where I'm going with this, and it's really not all that great. I like the beginning. I thought it had started off well with the Hawkeye story and his origin story and the continuation of a story. But once he got back to the States, it just became a one and done. And they're only, as I say, they're half the book. So it's a 12-issue story of Hawkeye going on an adventure with random villain and fighting his way out and using all the tricks that he can, showing his skills and this and that. And then the backup feature featuring, an Avenger, either in wings or on another team. Again, there's not enough room or time to tell a really good story with a very, significant point or point of view on that sort of thing. It's just there. You can tell a good story within, and there are some very fine stories that are 10 or 12 pages long. But to repeatedly do that every month with one of these Avengers, it just didn't work. And most of the stories are disposable. They don't have a lot to offer. So it's not really a great read. I would not really recommend this series, but there are better books to read. It can be fun from time to time, and again, from a collector's point of view, if you're looking at some of these characters and you just want to read everything about them, Moon Knight, Shroud, Hellcat, and then there's a couple of artists, as I say, Dave Conkrum, Amanda Connor, Jim Lee. So there's reasons to collect it for that. Speculator and investment, you're not going to get anything here. You could buy the first issue as a speculation, but I'm telling you, I got all of these books, and you can still get all of these books in the dollar bin. Even Pamela Douglas's first appearance and Sun Dragon in this one here, issue number 20, big deal. It doesn't make any kind of impact. They're all dollar books. So that's what I've got to say about the Solo Avengers. I will take a look at Avengers Spotlight next time. I'm sort of going through the Avengers as they go year by year as to what's happening. So I haven't forgotten about the West Coast Avengers or about the main body of Avengers, but this has all sort of happened simultaneously, and I sort of want to go through the history on a yearly basis in order. So next time I will be looking at the Avengers Spotlight. And that's it for now. So be good to yourself. Be good to others. Talk again soon.